You know, there have been the greatest minds, some of the greatest thinkers in the non-Jewish world, and even in the secular Jewish world, have attempted to explain anti-Semitism. But let me tell you one particular event which will underline the point that I want to make to you, the limud. There was a French philosopher named Jean-Paul Sartre. I think the proper pronunciation is Sartre. Right? It looks like it says Sartre. S-A-R-T-R-E. Sartre. Jean-Paul Sartre was a French philosopher. Something called existentialist philosophy. Right? He wrote a book called Anti-Semite and Jew. And in that book, he tears anti-Semites to shreds. And he appeared to be, at that time, perhaps one of the greatest Oyave Yisrael in the non-Jewish world. A champion of the Jewish cause. And a severe critic of anti-Semites. You know, later in life he got involved in a business deal with a Yid, and the Yid apparently didn't fear Zich Oif the way he was supposed to, and he took him for a ride. Guess who became one of the fiercest anti-Semites in France before he died? Jean-Paul Sartre. Surprise, surprise. But how is it possible that the author of Anti-Semite and Jew would become an anti-Semite? When he himself explained philosophically the vacuousness and the stupidity of anti-Semitism. How can he become an anti-Semite? There it is, because anti-Semitism defies our ability to understand it. Chazal tell us, and recently we probably talked about it in the Parsha, Chazal say, Halacha biyodua Esav soina liYaakov. We use the word halacha all over the place. Oh, this is a halacha, that's a halacha. But Chazal didn't use it as commonly and even to mean the same thing as we use it. When Chazal said the word halacha, they meant what's referred to as a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Something which defies our understanding. The word halacha is used by Chazal to refer to a principle or a law that is l'mayla, which supersedes our ability to understand things. Yes?
Does Esav refer only to like the descendants of Esav or all Goyim in general?
Usually it's taken to refer to Goyim in general.
But it's like...
But certainly...
The Germans are probably...
Since we're on Golus Edom, and Edom is an extension of Esav, so all of the Golus that we are affected by is the Golus of Esav. So Esav Son Yaakov would refer to the Golus that we're in. So even racially, if you want to trace the ethnicity of each nation to Esav, that may be a little bit difficult, but it's still Golus of Esav. Yes.
But your SHMUEL is a child of...
Right? That's right. That's right. That's right. Although he was a Shver, so a lot of Yishmael went through Esav. Right? Again, let's not get hung up on the racial or the ethno-racial aspects of all of this. But I'll tell you what one Chassidish Gadol said is the explanation of why Chazal said this is a halach, because it defies our understanding. You know, there are many Goyim that hate the Jews because we are capitalists. We're too wealthy. You know, one of the main reasons that Jews were hated in Germany and in Poland is because Jews were communists. Well, one second. I must scratch my head in amazement. Are we being hated for being capitalists or communists? But those are opposites. How can we be hated for both? Teretz is halacha biyadua. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai defies our understanding. We are taught, however, the Gemara in Shabbos tells us, why was Sinai called Sinai? Har Sinai, where the Torah was given. Why was it called Sinai? It's the Har Shemishom Yordo Sino L'Soneim Shel Yisrael. Sino descended from Har Sinai upon the Soinim of Klal Yisrael. What does that have to do with Torah? Very simple. And this will sound simplistic, but it's really not. Did you ever notice that the same atrocities, so-called atrocities, same acts that are committed by the non-Jewish world, Arabs, this, that, and the other, when they do atrocities against one another, it's no problem. When Yidden do similar things in self-defense, we're raked over hot coals by the world. We're held to a completely different standard. Did you ever notice that? United Nations is the biggest joke in New York. Somebody goes to the United Abominations. It's a gelechter. It's a narishkeit. But why is that? Torah says, because when Sinai came down, Sinai to the world, we're held to a different standard because we are in a different standard. We were given Torah. We became the moral conscience of the world. We are an or lagoyim. It is our tafkid to be mashpia on the world. We only can be mashpia on the world by holding ourselves to a higher moral standard. But that may be at the seat of anti-Semitism. You know, sometimes I know, maybe not you, but when I was a kid, I used to hate the best kid in the class. We used to call them browners. I don't know if those words are used anymore. Somebody spends his whole life studying. Ridiculous. We used to be jealous, perhaps. But there was always resentment to the best kid in the class. I have news for you. We are the best kid in the class. Klal Yisrael, because we have a Torah. We have a neshama that sets us up to be the Mekablei HaTorah. We have a Tzelem Elikim, which is on a higher madrega. If you look at the Orach Chaim and Parshas Bereishis, our Tzelem Elikim is on a higher madrega than the Tzelem of the Goyim, which is also a Tzelem of Hashem, but not in the same madrega. Anti-Semitism is a rule in the universe, and all of the B'nai B'rith anti-defamation leagues in the world are not going to be able to eradicate anti-Semitism because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu implanted into the Golus. Maybe it's what's keeping us alive, the fact that we always have to defend ourselves. And by defending ourselves, we're redefining ourselves over and over and over again. By redefining ourselves, we're being mechazik what we are. Maybe that's what the HaKadosh Baruch Hu had in mind. But we should understand the eternity of this Sinas Yisrael, that is until Mashiach comes. Mashiach comes, Shibud Malchias will be over, we will not be subjugated by the forces of anti-Semitism, because we won't need to be. Because Oz Ef Oichel Amim Sofa Brura Likroi Kula Mishan Hashem. At the time of Bias Mashiach, all the nations will accept HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the domination, the spiritual domination of Klal Yisrael, who represents the Rabbi Shalom. So we should understand the definition of anti-Semitism, put it into a historical perspective, because people use the word, they don't understand really what's going in the kishka of this concept. And what you have to understand, the limud of this number 4, limud it's a halacha, it's something which is l'mayla from our seichel, l'mayla from our ability to grasp it. It's a cosmic force which HaKadosh Baruch Hu implanted into the world. The only thing is that it happens to be the flip side of a whole bunch of good stuff, like the fact that we have a Torah. And the fact that we do have a kiyum. We'll talk more about the kiyum of Klal Yisrael a little bit later. Let's go to number 5. Number 5 is perhaps the most painful, so therefore I don't want to belabor it too much. It's commonly felt that the Yidden in North America during World War II were sitting with folded arms and just getting on with life, not caring too much, and certainly not doing a whole lot to save Yidden in Europe. To some extent, there may be truth to that. You get used to the status quo. You pick up the paper one day and you read that there were 100,000 Yidden killed in Warsaw, and you read on the next day there was 50,000 Yidden killed in Lodz. So by the third day, you see the headline, you turn to the sport pages. There's a certain apathy which is created, but more than that. Yes?
I thought the American government was hiding the situation.
Was what the situation?
Hiding.
To a certain extent. Till the end of 1943, they were hiding it, then it became popularly known. Something called the Auschwitz Protocols, which were published in 1943, when it became common knowledge what was happening. And there was the rabbi on Erev Yom Kippur in 1943, the rabbi's march in Washington, where he demanded to meet with the President Roosevelt, who didn't feel that he had time to meet with him. And they looked after FDR's agenda for the day, and he had virtually nothing happening, no meeting, nothing. Didn't meet with him. American complicity, American assistance in World War II was a noisei b'fnei atzma, which I didn't even talk about. But what about Jewish complacency? people did know about it, and there were people who were trying to save. The Agudas Yisrael had the Vada Hatzolah. There was even a group of right-wing Zionists also who had something called the Vada Hatzolah, and often they worked together to try to bargain with the Germans to save Yidden. There were small snippets of success that they had. But my estimate, based on documentation, is that at least 1.5 million Yidden who could have been saved were not saved because of the inability of these Jewish groups to muster up enough support and solidarity on the part of Jews here. And why not? Well, apathy is one thing. Disunity was another thing. Not for me. Non-for-me would say, those Varatzola lunatics are coming to raise money. Don't give them, don't help them. This is all documented. And there were those who said, we cannot divert any Jewish energy to the saving of Jews from the Third Reich. There are more important things for us to do. We must create the state of Israel. I'm not getting into a tirade against Zionism. That's not what I came to talk to you about. But so many different splinterings of Jewish sentiment during those years resulted in approximately 1.5 million Jewish lives being sacrificed on the Mizbeach of disunity. You know, the Haman Harosha came into Achashverosh on that eventful day. It says that Haman said to the Melech, we have a Kabbalah that every time it says the word Melech in the Megillah, it doesn't refer only to Achashverosh, it refers to the Melech, Malchei Amlochim, and Kodesh Baruch Hu. So when it says that Haman said to the Melech, you know, Your Majesty, Yesh noi am echad mefuzar mefayre beno amim, v'dosehem shoynos mikalam, v'dosei hamelech einam moisim, v'la hamelech ein shover lahanicham. Let's destroy them. So the drunken Melech said, okay. And he gave off a signet ring to Haman, and the rest, you know. You knew that too, probably. But the way we understand it from Chazal is Vayomer Haman el HaMelech refers not only, if this is a comical topic, then, you know, maybe I'm not doing a very good job. But it really isn't. Vayomer Haman el HaMelech is what Haman said is addressed also to the Rabbi Shalom. Haman said to the Melech Malchei Amlochim, Yeshnoi Am Echad. There's a people who thrive on their being Ba'achtus. Under HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no such thing as Jewish Achtus without the Hashem Echad. But look at them. They're Mefuzah or Mefayrod. They're torn apart by Machlekes. V'la Melech and V'shoy v'la Hanicham. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is this that wonderful people that you're so proud of? In HaKadosh Baruch Hu's tefillin it says, Umi kamcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz. HaKadosh Baruch Hu acknowledges this is the blood that flows through Jewish veins, the blood of Achdus. The Gemara says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wears tefillin, whatever that means. Mi kamcha Yisrael goy echad. Yeshnei am echad. But the mefuzim mefayred. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you're right, and he agreed that Klal Yisrael deserves destruction. By the way, the Chassidish from tell us this is why Purim is called Purim, not Pur. There wasn't only a plan and a conspiracy down to Olam Hazeh, done by physical people, Haman and Achashverosh, but it's Purim because there were lots drawn, so to speak, in the Shamayim, where it was agreed upon that the Yidden are deserving of destruction. Klal Yisrael has always thrived on its Achdus. Where Achdus doesn't exist, then we don't exist. And Esther Hamalka understood this as well. When she told Mordechai HaYehudi to go and to tell the Yidden of Shushan to fast and to do tshuva, it wasn't something that she said, Sumu Olai, but she said what at the beginning? Lech Knoises Kala Yehudim. Gather them up. What does that mean? Is it because there were no loudspeakers? You have to have them all there. Knois, says the Svasemis, Knois is Kol Yehudim, means infuse into them once again the spirit of unity. On the basis of that, they are going to be mesugal to do tshuva, and because of the tshuva of Klal Yisrael that we were spared in the time of Haman. Number 6 is what Alimut called the outreach imperative. This is a tougher limud, so I need for you to give me your attention. And by the way, I apologize. If I was mavayish anyone before, I didn't mean to. But I do, and I also understand that it's a small room, it's tightly packed. It's not a Warsaw ghetto, but it's tightly packed. I feel the sweat on my forehead, so I understand that this is not, physically the most simple circumstance to be in. But this is stuff which is oimdim beruma shel olam. It's a choiv kodesh, as I mentioned before, in the name of Rav David Shustel. The outreach imperative is part and parcel of those limudim. As I said before, 1939, Yidden were in a worse ruchnistic matzav than they were in 1938. And 38 was worse than 37. Things kept on getting progressively worse. Now, let's consider today. What's the matzav of Klal Yisrael in North America today? Intermarriage for the most part of the Jewish population in the United States and Canada, around 50%. Oh yeah, churban, it is. But you have to understand two things. Number one, that's also something we learned from Mitzrayim. When you think that Yidden left Mitzrayim, you have to remember that most Yidden stayed. Pasuk says, "V'chamushim olu b'nei Yisrael Mitzrayim." Chamushim means bavofen. They were with weapons, with arms. Right? Mizuyonim. But the Medrash Chazal said that it means only 1 in 5, or maybe even 1 in 50, left. The rest stayed. What happened to them? The same thing that might be happening to Achenu b'nei Israel today. That's part of Jewish Golus. And that smacks of the surrounding circumstances of the Churban of Yehadus Europa, the surrounding circumstances of World War II and the Holocaust. The matzav was going down increasingly. Today, it's bad, like I just mentioned, but there's something called the Baal Tshuva movement. In Eretz Yisrael and in America for the last 30 years or so, hundreds of thousands of Yidden have been chayzer b'tshuva. V'shavu banim ligvulam, like little kinderlich coming home to their homes. It's a time when the Rabbi has sent down a hashra, an inspiration of tshuva. Not only for us, the story of a bocher who went to learn in the yeshiva, and he came from a ger home. It wasn't mamash a ger chas, but Zaydu had been whatever. So when he went to learn yeshiva's Or Sameach, famous yeshiva, mostly for Baalei Tshuva. He went to learn the yeshiva, and he decided he's going to visit the ger Rebbe because his family, he wanted to connect with his roots. He went to the basis to the Leif Simcha, the ger Rebbe. So I asked him, "Who are you?" So he said his name. Vila asked, "Where are you learning?" He said, "I'm learning in yeshiva's Or Sameach, but I'm not a Baal Tshuva." So the Rebbe asked him, "Why not? It's supposed to be Baalei Tshuva." But the outreach imperative is not only that we should do tshuva. That goes without saying. Every day. We say we do tshuva every day, apparently, unless you're not thinking about what you're saying. Outreach. If there's about 250,000 Jewish people in the greater metropolitan Toronto area, I know from the Perspectives mailing list, I was the editor of Perspectives for 20 years, it was my paper. I know that our mailing list had it going to 5,000 addresses, almost all of which were in Toronto. And we came out every family of Shem Mitzvahs. So I estimate on average 5 people per family. 5,000 addresses meant about 25,000 people who are frum in one way or another. Shomrei Shabbos.
Isn't it much more now?
No. It's not much more now. I apologize for turning that off, and I'm going to do that now. It's happened in the Oracle. Okay. It's not much. Maybe it's 30,000 now. Right? We're looking maybe at 10% of the Jewish population. 90% of Klal Yisrael is drowning. Let's say you're walking down the riverbank one day, and you see, even a non-Jew, but certainly you see a Yid, somebody that you know is your next door neighbor, she's your next door neighbor, and they fell into the river, and there's a current there, and they're drowning. Would you say, let's do this multiple choice, which of the following would you do? You would say, well, A, easy come, easy go. Would you say, oh, what a pity, she was such a nice person? B, or C, would you try to do whatever is in your power to do to help her? Of course, it would be C. But yet, when we have these people drowning in a spiritual river, with a cultural current pulling them down, do we do anything resembling C? We don't. There are some that do. And I'm not saying that, when you leave here today, you should go and be in the car of somebody in Lawrence Plaza. You're not necessarily ready or capable, knowledgeable, yet enough to do that. Maybe you are. You're seminary girls. You're not kinderlich anymore. But entertain the notion of sometime being a yad hamsayas, a yad to help people to reawaken that spirit. The famous Musa Sefer, the Orchos Tzadikim, says the greatest chesed that you can do with another person is to reawaken in him a dormant Jewish neshama. That sounds like a 21st century concept. The Orchos Tzadikim, written hundreds of years ago. The Sfas Emes writes, included in the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, what you give somebody back his Aveda. So what does he lose? He loses a nice pen, a pen, just make sure that I have my pen, a ring, a dus, Hashavas Aveda, Hashavas Aveda. What possession does a person have which is more precious than his neshama? Does it not make sense that we should be mekayim the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda for a person's neshama? We see tens of thousands of Yidden whose neshamas are lost. The Torah says, you're not allowed to avert your gaze and pretend as if you don't see that. So if it's later in life, whether it's inviting somebody over a Suda Shabbos or a Yom Tov Suda, a Hanukkah Lechtel, whatever it is, whether it's maybe later on learning with somebody on the phone, there's something called partners in Torah. There's so many things that we could do and that we must do. And we look back 70 years to a time when the matzav of Klal Yisrael was going down and down and down, and there was no such thing as a Baal Tshuva movement. There was no hashra'ah, there was no inspiration coming down from the Shemayim to get people to be reawakened to the Yiddishkeit. It was just a miserable battle being lost. Now the dice are loaded in our favor. How dare we just forget about that fact? That's a limud which in a negative oifen is something which emanates from considering the Holocaust. There are those who refer to what happens today with North American Jewry also as a Holocaust, except they're calling it as a white Holocaust. No Zyklon B pellets, no death wagons or death trucks, death vans. It's just the universities, assimilation, intermarriage, the media, technology, and its abuses. We have to do something. How are we going to answer the Rabbi Shalom Duchindet and Svanzer? You're going to go up and they'll say, did you take care of my children? Did you help? Did you try to take care of my kinderlich? What are you going to say? Oh, I was busy, I had a dentist appointment. What are we going to say to the Rabbi Shalom? No excuse. Let me go to limud number 7. Twice a year we read about Milchemes Amalek. One is in Parshas Beshalach, in the Maftir. And we read the actual story of Amalek, even before the Maftir. Vayovoy Amalek, we read about the war that was waged by Amalek against our ancestors and Refidim on our way out of Eretz Yisrael. And then in Parshas Kiseitze, we're commanded midiraisa, according to many shittas, even women are commanded the same deraisa of Zechiras Amalek. Zohar, we read Parshas Zohar, SHMUEL Amalek, but there it says in Mitzrayim. In Beshalach, when the Torah refers to the war of Amalek against Klal Yisrael, it refers to the war as being a milchama lahashem Amalek. The war of Amalek is not on this worldly level. The war of Amalek is a divine struggle, which is eternal. Gedolei Yisrael have referred to the Nazis, some even to the entire German population during the war, as Amalek. That was the Amalek of the Heintige Zeit. Amalek is very interesting, by the way. Amalek follows us around. When we got out of Mitzrayim, who was there? Amalek. And later in the time of Shaul HaMelech, they were with us in Eretz Yisrael. Shaul had the opportunity to wipe them out with Milchemes Agog, and he didn't, so he got punished, etc., etc. But they were there with us. A couple of centuries later, we were in far-off Persia. Who was there with us? Haman HaAgogi. Centuries later, we were in Germany. Who's there with us again? Amalek. Wherever we go, the Amalekim are there with us. Talked about Mary's lamb before. They're with us all the time. I prefer to look at it like innately connected to Klal Yisrael, but like if you have a garden at home, people in Toronto have gardens. You take a rock which has been sitting in the garden for some time and pick it up. Look at the underside. Ugh. Could have bugs on it. It's muddy, slimy, green, brown, as I said, ants or whatever is crawling all over it. On the other side of the rock, it's shiny and beautiful. But that's really the relationship we have with Amalek. We're the beautiful, shiny side of the rock. On the underside of that rock is Amalek. They follow us around. They're connected to us. We need to understand that the Milchama that the Nazis waged against Klal Yisrael was a war against the revengeful, not a war against the Jewish people. When they came into Poland, the people that they hunted down the most, as if like if they don't do that then their whole war is going to be lost, were what they referred to as the Wunder Rabbiners, the Chassidish Rebbes of Poland. For some reason the Alexander Rebbe, of the Akedas Yitzchak, he was on the top of their list of Gedolim that had to be hunted down and killed. The Baba Veru, the Kaddish Sian, lost his life because of that. So either they were the Wunder Rabbiners or they were known as the Talmudisten. You can imagine what that means. The yeshiva students. The first things to be burnt and torn down were the shuls and the Bate Midrashos. If you were caught in a ghetto forming a minyan, you would be shot. Whoa, Sven, what's it? You want to kill them? Kill them. What does it bother you that before they get shot, they can have a minyan? Because it was a war of Amalek against HaKadosh Baruch. Yes.
How are Torah leaders allowed to be saved while their communities or Hasidim were like? How could they let people spend money on
because of the concept of a future. Without Hanukkah Story, there wouldn't be no Torah. And some didn't, and those who did, weeping, felt that the future of Klal Yisrael will be more endangered if we don't have Hanukkah Torah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai stole out of Yerushalayim in a coffin, knowing that Yerushalayim was going to be razed to the ground. and it was going to be pillaged and burnt, and the Yidden were going to be killed. But he knew that if he didn't have Yavne v'Chachameho, he didn't have a future of Torah, there would be no Jewish seminary, Torornto Seminary in our day, or there would be no yeshiva down the road. There would be nothing. But that's not entirely for now. I had an uncle, my mother's oldest brother, who went out. He was in Lodz at the early part of the war. He was Garrick Ohlsson. He went out, and he came back a few hours later, and he was weeping. And he had a towel, or a shmata, whatever it was, around his head. What was he weeping about? He was weeping about the fact that the Nazis stopped him, and they cut off one of his payas. Why one of his payas? Homan was a barber, so suddenly the Germans are barbers. That was nothing to do with that.
Well, they knew we couldn't cut off the other one.
No, it's because, that's right. It's because the best thing you can do to a Jew to dehumanize him is to make him look ridiculous. One paya. And there are other Jews, both payas got cut off or ripped out. There's a Yid in Toronto, his name is Rabbi happens to the Aguda, who remembers the payas, one paya being ripped out of his father's head on Yom Kippur, I think it was 1942, in Petrikov. The cutting off of beards. Their agenda was against the Revengeful Shalom. We represent the Revengeful Shalom. We are HaKadosh Baruch Hu's foot soldiers. That's why the war was declared against us, because we represent HaKadosh Baruch Hu. One of the most impacting pictures that I saw from Holocaust pictures is a picture which actually was taken before World War II began, but it was in Austria, after the Germans were already in Austria. And they were wreaking havoc among Jewish residents in Vienna. There's a picture of a line of Chassidish Yidden. And at the front of the line, there's an old Chassidish Yid. And he was made by the Nazi soldiers who were standing around him and laughing. You see the laughter on their faces. This old Yid, leading a procession of Jews, was wearing a sign on his chest. And the sign read in German, "Our God will save us." What was that all about? They were laughing at the Jew because he represented God, and they laughed at the Jew who expressed emunah in God by saying, "This is what your emunah is." Hardy, har, har. That is Amalek. Milchama la'Hashem b'Amalek. Near the beginning of the war in the city of Lublin, Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, which I've had the schus of visiting already and speaking in 4 times already. Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, which was the pride and joy of all of the Yahadus of Poland. Magnificent, magnificent building. It's still there. And it had the biggest library in Europe. Oitzer HaSvar, not a library. Oitzer HaSvar.
Nowadays it's empty.
The library is empty. The room is refurbished.
They showed us by the
Miss
chart.
Medrash is refurbished.
What's the building for?
It was a nursing school for many years, until the Jewish community bought it back from the Polish government. Now it's a tourist
And Sima Shas, there was...
Yeah, Sima Shas, the last 2 or 3 Siyumim, there's a small group of a few hundred Yidden who get together, and not Polish Yidden, but Yidden from here.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend of mine who went to the Sima Shas in Lublin last Siyum, not this past year. At any rate, let's not digress. Near the beginning of the war, the Germans came in, they commandeered Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin, because that was the most beautiful building, one of the most beautiful buildings in the town. Schlepped out cartloads and cartloads and cartloads and cartloads of Svarim and brought it into a field not far from the yeshiva and set the whole thing ablaze. And the Yidden were ordered prior to that to stand around and to look. And they were crying, and they were crying, the Yidden were crying. Their weeping got so loud that a German soldier wrote in his diary that it was decided to drown out the noise of Jewish sobbing, the Germans should bring one of their military bands to come and play loud military music to drown out the noises. This was recorded in a German newspaper in 1942, almost 3 years after the event itself, as a source of pride. The German soldier wrote, "We knew that we were doing a great thing by burning all of these Jewish books." What do they have with Jewish books? You want to kill the Jewish people, leave their books alone. I mean, how does that help you? You're diverting some of your military energy to doing something which seems to have no use to you whatsoever. Teretz says, Milchamo Lashem B'Amalek. After the war, there were the Nuremberg war trials. Right away, within months after the war. A dozen or more, I think maybe 18, German leaders were put on trial. Some escaped or took their own lives, such as Hitler himself, but those who were apprehended by the Allied armies were put on trial for crimes against humanity. And most of them were executed. One of them was Julius Streicher, who was the editor of the Stürmer. The Stürmer was the main propaganda machine, the newspaper of the Nazis. It was founded in 1925. And that's what did succeed in poisoning the German mind. He was put on trial, he was found guilty, and he was to be executed. And the execution took place. And this is recorded in the New York Times of 1945, a day or two after the event took place. He was executed, and the day was Hoshana Rabbah, 1945. Almost a half year after liberation. He had a noose around his neck, and the floorboards under him were about to be opened, and he would fall to a very richly deserved death. And before that happened, he looked out to those who had assembled to see that the execution take place, and he said, Purim Fest, 1945. He was wrong about the date, of course, but not wrong about the concept. Purim Fest, the celebration of Purim, 1945. He meant to say, it happened once, we came back. And it's happening again now, and you're celebrating Purim Fest now in 1945 with the death of me and my cronies. But we're not gone. Milchom al Hashem ba'Amalek midor dor. The forces that question the supremacy of the Rabbi Shalom are the same forces that will try to subjugate us and make us suffer. And that's an eternal and cosmic force we mustn't lose sight of. That's a limud of the Holocaust, which we must not avoid. What's a hero? We're coming to limud number 8, and I'm going to try to cram things in. What is limud number 8? Ultimate Jewish heroism. What is a hero? If you look in the dictionary for the definition of hero, a man of distinguished courage or ability admired for his brave deeds and noble qualities. When you think of Jewish heroism during World War II, what do you think about? Those of you who have read a little bit about World War II, what do you think about when you think about Jewish heroism during World War II? Yes?
People who saved other Jews at the risk of their own lives.
Good. I'm glad that that's what you think about.
Yeah.
In the secular Jewish world, what they think about are the fighters. And I'm not minimizing their chashivas. Those who took up arms and tried to fight against the Nazis in the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the Bialystok Ghetto Uprising, in the Treblinka concentration camp, and many others. But that's not the ultimate Jewish heroism. The ultimate Jewish heroism was what we just heard. People risk their lives for others. People risk their lives to do a mitzvah. People in the middle of a concentration camp felt that what they need to do is to make a sukkah in order to be able to make the bracha of Leish B'Sukkah in the midst of that Gehenna. People who wouldn't eat the tiny bit of food which they needed for basic sustenance, wouldn't eat it on Yom Kippur until after dark. They had a perfect right to eat because Pikuach Nefesh is doich everything in the Torah. But they didn't. Let me tell you a story about the Bluzhev Rebbe. I don't know if it's written in the notes or the points. I'm skipping a lot of things because of time, but this story is kedai here. It's a Hanukkah story. Not the type of Hanukkah story that you would have expected to hear last week. And you may have read the story. I think it's published somewhere. I think the year was 1943, and the name of the place was Bergen-Belsen. Bergen-Belsen had once upon a time been a German military camp in the 20s and 30s. It was a choshev, a place. It was turned into a concentration camp and into a death camp. It was one of the worst. And it's in Germany, not Poland. Later, after it was converted into a displaced persons camp, a DP camp, where were brought in those who had no homes anymore, and they lived there until they were able to go somewhere else. I have a sister, Olga Zinzai. She was born in Bergen-Belsen in 1946. 1943, in the midst of the wars, Hanukkah Banach, or it was a few days before Hanukkah, the Bluzhev Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik V'Kodesh L'Brocha, a great tzaddik who didn't look like a rebbe, I can assure you, in that situation. He looked like anyone else, wearing the prison issue, the German issue of uniform, the striped uniform with the wooden clogs and hair raised off the head, etc. Didn't look like a rebbe, but he was a Bluzhev Rebbe, and he had a group of Chassidish Yidden around him who knew who he was, and he was always held in high regard by them, even in the midst of that Gehenna. A few days before Hanukkah coming, the Bluzhev Rebbe said, "Oy vay, what are we going to do to celebrate Hanukkah? How can we let a Hanukkah come, the Nitzochen against the Yevonim, and not to commemorate it in some way? Where can we get a Hanukkah Lom? How can we tzin lech?" Well, he was bemoaning the fact. But among the Chassidim who were there, they started saying, "But Rebbe, I can devise a Hanukkah Lom." He took off his shoe. There were wooden clogs issued by the Germans, for the most part, where the ball of the foot goes in the back of the foot, the heel. There's a sort of a concave area of the shoe. If we had oil and a wick, we can put the oil into that, and we can we can light the Hanukkah candle there. But where do we get oil? So one of the other guys said, I have a job to, every morning I have to polish the boots of the capo. The capo was either a Jew or a German who would be like a counselor in a camp, except Lahavdul Elef Havdolas. He had to make sure that everything was okay in the barracks. He was treated a little bit better by the Germans, and he often did terrible things to those under his control. My job, this chassid said, is to polish the capo's boots every morning. You know what I use? I use black shoe paste. You know what the paste is based on? An oil. If we heat it up and get a liquid out of it, we can use that for oil. It's not shemen zayzoch. Doesn't matter. It's an oil. Kol hashmanim. All oils are okay. As far as wicks, where are we going to get basilois? Not a problem. Everyone was able to take a few threads out of their uniforms, and they started they started weaving them, braiding them together. So we have everything. We're all set. We will be all set. So okay, we can get in the Hanukkah lech. A couple days later, the first night of Hanukkah comes, and the Frum Yidden gather around, but even the non-Frum, because Hanukkah, is one of those Yom Tov that appeals even to those who are not particularly Shomer Torah mitzvahs. They gathered around, and the Bluzhev Rebbe was about to tzin Hanukkah lech. They got the shoe paste and melted it down, the shoe and the wicks, everything was all in place. And the Rebbe, I don't know what he used for Shabbos, but whatever he lit, stood there, and Yidden were listening. And he said the first bracha, and he said the second bracha, and he stopped. He couldn't continue. And he waited about probably a full half a minute. He looked around, and he continued and said the bracha Shechianu. Let the Hanukkah lech, maybe the same Hanukkah, so Lolam I don't know. What's important in the story is that after that, one of those who had not been a Premier before the war, but a respectful person came up to the Bluzer Rebbe and said, Rebbe, I don't understand. You make a bracha, shake it, show him, it's voice of it's Yvonne, Hanukkah. I understand, you made the bracha, we have a mitzvah, you Hanukkah, I'll show you. You made the bracha, Shos and Nisim, Lavasenu, Verstehe ich auch it. Because there were miracles that took place in those days. But Rebbe, how could you say the bracha of Shechayonu? We're in this Gehenna on this world. This is what we're thanking the Rabbi Shalom for. That He kept us alive, He sustained us to the point, Lazman Azet, to this matzav. How can we say such a bracha? So the Bluzer Rebbe answered him, my friend, I had the same problem. I had the same question. And I was not able to say the bracha. But then I looked around. And I saw all the Yidden, those who had been frum, those who were not frum, all the Yidden are standing there waiting for me to say and to continue and to say the next bracha and to tins Hanukkah. I said to myself, Oy Nishalaylam, how wonderful is your people. They're all starving. They all haven't had a shower in months, years maybe. They've all lost relatives. They're in the peak of tsar. Yet all they want right now is to hear me say this bracha and to tzin Hanukkah. So I said to myself, if ever there were a reason to say Asher Chiyanu, it's for my schus of seeing this. My schus of seeing what Yidden are all about. I thank the Rabbi Shalom for keeping me alive to see this godless of Klal Yisrael. That was my Shechiyah. The Yid thanked the Bluzer Rebbe. After the war, he ended up becoming a Shemitah Torah mitzvahs. He met the Bluzer Rebbe maybe 20 years after Muhammad. He reminded him of the story. He said, Rebbe, I became frum because of your answer. Lesson number 9 is the dry bones. I don't know if you've learned Yecheskel. I think it's Perek Lamed Zayin says it. About HaKadosh Baruch Hu showing him a field filled with dry bones, and he asked, no, Yecheskel, do you think these bones can come back to life? Yecheskel Hanavi said, nah, not a chance. So Hashem said the equivalent of, watch this. And slowly the bones became covered with gidim and with basar and oil, and the bones came back to life. The Atzamas HaYeveshis came back to life. The concept of Atzamas HaYeveshis coming back to life is a concept which is crucial when we think about the Holocaust. I mean, I for one would not be standing here had it not been for the ability of Jewish people to get it back together. Both of my parents, both of my wife's parents, lost every sibling, every parent that was alive, and as I mentioned earlier, even children. Is a normal human being capable of walking away from the past and saying, doesn't matter, I'm going to go ahead anyways? I would argue that most people would not be able to. I'm not saying that my parents were special in that regard, but they and their peers, they and people like them, were able to do that. The resiliency of the Jewish person, the resiliency of the Jewish spirit. Give you just one example of that. An example which I share because I share with commonly other people because it symbolizes for me this resiliency. In Toronto, you don't have that much occasion to see Garrick Ohlsson walking on the street. You see some Bavovers.
We did once.
When I lived there.
Yeah. The whole...
When the guy Rabbi came.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Nice.
I remember Beis Hakkam Elementary. But generally, there aren't too many Garrick Ohlsson. Go to Bar Park, go to Bnei Brak in Yerushalayim, so it's the biggest regular Chassidus in the world. I'm not talking about Satmar or Lubavitch at this point. I'm talking about from the regular Chassidus, and it's, there can be 12,000, 13,000 people by the Rebbe on Rosh Hashanah. And so you may know, you may not know that most Garrick Sidim, certainly the young ones, wear their pants tucked into their socks. They call it in Yiddish, Hoisensock. All of my sons and sons-in-law dress in that way, and I do on Shabbos as well. That's not the point. Why am I telling you this? I'm going to tell you the story of a Yid whose name was his name is so Gezintzan. His name was Reuven Eisner. It's probably 90, 91, 92. He's the grandfather of my oldest son-in-law. He has a beard like this, without exaggeration. Well, like this. A Garrick Chassid, believe it, whenever he's up every morning, despite his age, 4 o'clock in the morning, he's learning. Big Talmud Chacham. The following is a story of Reuven Eisner, who was liberated in Buchenwald, I think it was, in May of 1945. He was half dead, a skeleton, despondent, thinking that this would never end. But then the day came, he saw American soldiers coming through the gates of Buchenwald. And he realized that the German guards, the SS, who were his tormentors and everyone else's tormentors for years, were nowhere to be seen. They had all run away. And he realized that it's all over. First thing he did is he bent down and put his pants into his socks. What kind of pants he had, what kind of socks he had, that's a different meister. But his act of defiance was immediate. Defiance? There was no one to defy anymore. But he knew immediately that the dry bones had the ability to come back to life. He bent down and resumed life as it had been 6 years before that, at the drop of a dime. The resiliency of the Jewish spirit. One of the tzaddikim I adored during the war years and survived, Rabbi Lebelzer, maybe a couple months after the Milchama, I think it was Parshas B'Shalach, so it must have been, sometime months after the Milchama, he said, Oz Yoshi Moshe v'nei Yisrael Sashir Azuis L'Hashem v'Yirmalei Moshe L'Hashem v'Koyah, etc. Shir Sayom, what's the godless of Shir Sayom? The Yidden sang, celebrated the salvation that they merited from the Rabbi Yishlayim. Well, yeah, that's certainly something to sing about. He says, no, that's not the godless. When did the Yidden have Krias Yamsuf? Chof Aleph Nisan. Weeks after, only weeks after Makas Choshech, and we know what Chazal tell us. Yidden died left and right during Makas Choshech. These Yidden were broken shards, broken remnants of mishpoches. They had every reason to say, I'm out of here. This is not for me. Their commitment to the Rebbeinu Shalom was very strong. They sang Shir Sayom. That's the godless Shir Sayom. Weeks after losing everything that they had, they were singing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Tehillah V'Tiferes. The last one, I assure you, is a limud that I could tell you in an hour, just in and of itself. I'll be misakim it in one story and a thought associated with it, and that'll be it for me today. The story takes us to a concentration camp in Poland named Starkowitz. 1943, I think it was. Simchas Torah Banacht. And this story I heard from the mouth of one who was there. He's a Yid, or the Gezintzan, his name is Rabbi Friedensson. For years was the editor of an Agudas Yisrael Yiddish magazine called Das Yiddish Abort, which I'm sure some of you have seen in your houses. Rabbi Friedensson was there b'Shas Ma'aseh, and he told the story, and I heard him say it several times. Simchas Torah Banacht. When we think Simchas Torah, we think about Akafis, and we think about Sudas Yom Tov, and people jumping and dancing and machen hupla, and it's a wonderful time. Baruch Hashem, we can celebrate Simchas Torah. Not in Starkowitz, not in 1943. There was a Rav there, a Shikol Rebbe, who also, like the Blues of Rebbe, had a group of people around him constantly. And he said, Simchas Torah, we can't just let the night go by without some sort of celebration. We're going to celebrate. Sudas Yom Tov? Yeah, right. Sefer Torah? Sure. He said, you know what? Let's just sing some of the piyutim. You know, there's a famous song that everyone sings. A lot of people put it to a Svardish niggin. Ein adir ka Hashem, ve'in bocher ki ben Amram, ein gedulot ka Torah, ve'in dorsheho ki Yisrael. Right? We sing it. Right? This is a piyut written by the Kozhnitzer Maggid, Megillah Chassidus, and he said, I know the piyut of the Kozhnitzer Maggid. And he started saying it and singing it. Not to that tune, I assure you, but on another tune. And the Chassidim around them started joining in. They started, Ein Adik Hashem. They were making a little bit too much noise. And SS guard barged in and says, what's going on here? And he went straight to the rabbi, because he knew that he was a rabbi. He says, what were you singing? And he didn't want to answer him. So he forced him to say, Ein Adik Hashem, Ein Bocher. Oh, what does it mean? He forced him to translate it. Ein Adik Hashem, he said that means there is no one who is as mighty as Hashem. Ein Bocher ki ben Amram, no one who's as choice, as select as Moshe. Ein Gedula ka Torah, there's nothing as great as the Torah HaKadosh. Ve'in dorsheho ki Yisrael, there's no one who can expound on the Torah as brilliantly as the Jewish people can. So the SS man started laughing and he said, do you believe that? And after pausing, the Rav nodded. He went to Yossel Friedenson, who had been a newspaper person in Warsaw before the war, and he knew German. And the SS guard, this is what he told me, the SS guard said, Friedenson, glauben Sie auch? Do you also believe in this? So Friedenson said, I do. And he went from people to people, from person to person, and they're all nodding their heads. Even the Fri people, they're all nodding their heads. And he said, I don't understand. This is the SS guard saying, look at where you are, your lives are worth nothing. You see the smokestack off in the distance? That's what your lives are worth. And you believe that nothing is as mighty, no one is as mighty as your God? And they all continued to nod until he stopped in his tracks and he said, I realized that even the Führer himself will not be able to do away with this people. And then he left. There's so much in that story, but the message, a limud, maybe one of the most important limudim, is the nitzchis of Klal Yisrael. Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker. We're here to stay. You've never met a Roman? I don't mean a person who may live in Rome. A Roman. You've never met a Moyovi? You've never set your eyes on a Girgoshi? Or any of the ancient peoples, even the greatest empires. Anyone here know an Assyrian? Ashur? The Umayyas come and they go. Only Klal Yisrael's around. For the people that were in Golis, exiled, we are the only ones to survive because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. We will always survive. That's what it means to be a Yid. And going back to one of the first limudim, Klal Yisrael was born in Golis. We know all about Golis. We're real pros at handling it because that's why we were created in Mitzrayim. Golis is in our blood. The ability to withstand Golis is in our hearts, in our stamina, and that's why we will be Nitzchi, and we will be Zoicha from Mashiach to come. He wrote something that should be sooner rather than later. We should all be able to burn all of the Holocaust literature and say it's no longer necessary. Amen.
Thank you.